Can she sit with us? The little girl asked the poor waitress, and her Millionaire CEO, Dad, smiled. The breakfast rush was in full swing. Plates clattered, orders flew from the kitchen window, and Karen Parker moved swiftly between tables with practiced ease. Her blonde hair was tied back in a low ponytail, wisps escaping as she bent to refill coffee mugs and slide plates across sticky tables. She wore plain jeans, a faded t-shirt tucked into her apron, and shoes with soles worn thin. Her steps were quiet, but her eyes missed nothing. It was the kind of morning that left no room for thinking, just moving, responding, surviving. In a corner booth by the window, a little girl in a pink dress swung her legs beneath the table. Her curly hair bounced every time she turned her head, which was often. She watched everything. Her name was Joyce Cole, and she had been there for 10 minutes, sitting perfectly still, save for her wide, curious eyes. Karen noticed her only when she brought over a glass of orange juice. "You waiting for someone, sweetie?" she asked, kneeling slightly to be eye level. "My dad," Joyce said. "He says 5 minutes. That was 12 minutes ago." Karen smiled softly. "Well, I'll keep your juice cold until he gets here." Joyce looked at her thoughtfully. "You're nice. Most grown-ups rush." Karen shrugged. "Maybe I'm not most grown-ups." Just then, the front door chimed open. The din of clinking silverware and chatter dropped an octave. Karen straightened, her tray half full. Luke Cole stepped into the diner like someone entering a courtroom, tall, composed, in a dark suit that somehow looked too formal for scrambled eggs. He removed his sunglasses and nodded at the hostess. Every server on the floor paused, even for a second. They knew who he was. Everyone did. Luke Cole, CEO of one of the largest financial firms on the coast. Powerful, untouchable, and rarely seen in places like this. His eyes swept the room once, landed on the booth by the window. "There you are," he said as he reached the table. His voice was smooth, distant. Joyce beamed. "You're 12 minutes late." "I know," he said, adjusting his cufflink. "Traffic." He hadn't noticed Karen yet. She moved quickly, trying to step away before. Her elbow nudged the edge of her tray, and the coffee cup tilted. A thin stream of hot liquid splashed across the table's edge, a few drops hitting the floor. Karen gasped. "I am so sorry." "It's okay," Joyce said brightly. "It didn't touch me." Luke's eyes lifted, cold and assessing. Karen grabbed a cloth from her apron, already wiping the mess. "I can bring you a fresh cup," she began, flustered. But then Joyce asked, clear and bright, "Can she sit with us, Daddy?" Karen froze. Her hand holding the cloth stilled. So did every conversation within earshot. Luke blinked. His gaze shifted back to his daughter, surprised. "What?" "I like her," Joyce said simply. "She talks like people who mean it." Karen laughed nervously, standing upright again. "Oh no, that's sweet, but I should get back." Luke looked at her. Really looked this time. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the corners of his mouth lifted. "If she wants to," he said. Karen stood there, caught between the weight of the room and the tiny hope in Joyce's eyes. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. After a beat, she gave a small smile. "I have 5 minutes," she said. Joyce clapped. "Yay!" Karen sat down on the edge of the booth, awkward in her apron, unsure what to do with her hands. Luke said nothing more, just watched his daughter smile wider than he had seen in weeks. And in that small, messy moment, something shifted, unnoticed by most, but impossible to ignore. Karen had only meant to sit for 5 minutes. But somehow, 5 turned into 15. Joyce was a whirlwind of questions and commentary, her pink dress catching crumbs from her toast, her tiny fingers gesturing as she spoke. "My mom used to order pancakes and call them clouds for breakfast. Did you know that?" she asked Karen. Karen shook her head gently. "No, I didn't, but I like that." "She's in heaven now," Joyce continued, her voice matter-of-fact. "Daddy says she watches me grow, but I don't get how. There aren't cameras up there, right?" Karen glanced across the table. Luke was silent, his expression unreadable. Joyce leaned forward. "Do you think people in heaven can hear us?" Karen hesitated. Her eyes dropped for a moment to her lap, then rose again, warm. "Maybe they hear us," she said softly, "through the things we do, the kindness we give, the way we remember them when we smile." Joyce nodded, like that made perfect sense. Luke, however, blinked. Slowly. He looked at Karen then, really looked, more curious than skeptical. Karen added, "Sometimes, I think, the heart remembers, even when the world forgets." For a moment, the table went quiet. Even Joyce seemed to pause, as if processing the weight of the words. Then she grinned. "My mom would have liked you. She liked people who didn't pretend." Karen chuckled. "I don't have time to pretend." Luke's lips parted slightly, then, without warning, he laughed. It was brief, but genuine. Not a polite exhale or a business smile laugh, but a real one. It startled even Joyce. Karen tilted her head. "Did I say something funny?" Luke shook his head. "No. Just unexpected." Joyce beamed. "He never laughs during breakfast." "I don't usually have breakfast with philosophers," Luke said dryly. Karen smirked. "Well, your philosopher's getting syrup on her elbows." Joyce looked down and squealed, reaching for a napkin. When the bill came, Luke pulled out his wallet without checking the total. He slid a few crisp bills onto the tray, including what looked like a generous tip. Karen noticed. As he reached for his coat, she stood too, scooping the bills up and gently pushing one back toward him. "No need, sir. She already paid me." He looked confused. "I don't understand." Karen smiled. With that smile, "That's more than enough." Luke stared at her, the sharp businessman exterior faltering for a split second. There was something in her eyes that wasn't pity or admiration, just clarity. "You sure?" he asked, his voice quieter. "I'm sure." Joyce jumped down from the booth and ran around to hug Karen's legs. "Bye, Miss Karen. I hope you're here next time." Karen knelt and hugged her back. "If not, I'll send someone just as nice." "She won't be you," Joyce said stubbornly. Luke watched the exchange in silence, his coat draped over one arm. As they turned to leave, he paused at the door, looked back at Karen. There was something unspoken in the look, a thank you, maybe, or a question he wasn't ready to voice. Karen returned to clearing tables, but her hands moved slower. That laugh, that look. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she wasn't thinking about her overdue bills or whether the diner manager would cut her shift again. She was thinking about a pink dress, a quiet man, and the way a moment, so small, had filled the whole room. The bell above the diner door rang with a familiar chime. Karen looked up from behind the counter, expecting to see Joyce's pink dress bouncing through the entrance. Instead, it was just Luke. Alone. He nodded politely toward the hostess, then made his way to the same booth he'd sat in the day before. He didn't have a briefcase or phone in hand, and he didn't glance at the menu. He just sat, quietly, waiting. Karen wiped her hands on her apron and approached his table with a cautious smile. "No breakfast companion today?" she asked lightly. Luke shook his head. "Not today." "You want the usual?" she offered, already reaching for her notepad. He looked up, then paused. "I guess I'm just waiting for the person who makes breakfast taste less lonely," he said softly. The words landed heavier than she expected. Karen's hand froze slightly over her notepad, but before she could answer, the diner door burst open again. "Miss Karen," a high-pitched voice squealed. Joyce came flying in, still in her school uniform, and, unsurprisingly, wearing the same pink dress. Behind her, a flustered woman in business attire, a nanny, clearly, rushed in, breathless. "Joyce Cole, you do not run off like that." Karen blinked. "Wait, did she just?" The nanny nodded, embarrassed. "She insisted on seeing you." Snuck out of the car at the red light. Karen crouched down as Joyce ran to hug her. "Did you really leave school just to see me?" Joyce nodded enthusiastically. "It's pancake day, and it felt wrong not to share it with you." Luke stood slowly, his face unreadable. "Joyce," he said calmly, "you left school without permission?" The little girl's smile faded instantly. "I'm sorry, Daddy." The nanny stepped forward. "I was going to take her back right away, Mr. Cole." Karen intervened, gently placing a hand on Joyce's shoulder. "It's okay. Let me talk to her?" Luke nodded, stepping back. His eyes followed every motion. Karen knelt. "Hey, I'm really glad you wanted to see me. But it's important to follow rules, okay? That's how we make sure everyone's safe." Joyce looked down. "But I missed you." Karen smiled and tapped her nose. "I missed you too. But you know what? Missing someone is just proof that they matter. And people who matter are worth waiting for the right time." Joyce nodded solemnly. "I'll say sorry to my teacher." Karen stood, taking Joyce's hand and guiding her gently back toward her nanny. Luke had watched the entire exchange silently. Now, as Karen approached the table again, he spoke. "You handled that well." Karen shrugged. "She's 5. Feelings run faster than common sense at that age. And some adults never grow out of that," he murmured. Karen glanced at him, then tilted her head. "You came back just for pancakes?" "No," Luke replied. "I came back because yesterday felt lighter. And I didn't realize how heavy breakfast had become until it wasn't." She gave him a warm smile. "Then let me bring you the lightest thing on the menu." As she turned, Luke watched her walk away. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't curiosity. It was something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Trust. The whispering began on a Monday. At first it was just a passing glance. Then, smirks behind Karen's back. A half-covered giggle from one of the new waitresses. Eventually, someone accidentally left a tabloid article near the employee lockers. "Local waitress cozies up to billionaire single dad. What's her angle?" Karen froze. There was a grainy photo of her, Joyce, and Luke outside the diner, framed to look like a secret rendezvous. The headline turned her stomach. By midweek, the manager called her into the office. He didn't look her in the eyes. "Karen, we're getting attention we didn't ask for," he said, crossing his arms. "Some of our more regular patrons feel uncomfortable." She stared at him. "Because I served pancakes to a child? Because people think you're using that child to get to her father. I'm sorry. It's not good for business." "So you're firing me over gossip?" "I'm letting you go before this becomes worse. Consider it a clean break." Karen walked out without saying a word. Her apron still hung over her arm when she exited the diner for the last time. The next morning, Joyce bounded into the diner, pink dress swaying, a crayon drawing clutched in her hands. She ran straight to the booth near the window. But the booth was empty. Karen was gone. The hostess knelt beside Joyce. "Sweetheart, Karen's not working today." Joyce blinked, then looked around. "Where is she?" "I don't know, honey." Joyce's face crumpled. "But I made her something." Tears welled up, and within seconds she was crying. Real, unfiltered sobs that echoed off the walls. Every customer turned. The restaurant hushed. That was the moment Luke entered. He saw the scene unfold. His daughter collapsed in a booth, crying, her drawing crushed in her tiny fist. He rushed to her side. "Joyce, what happened?" Between gasps, she said, "She's gone. You made her go away." Luke stiffened. "What?" "You said people were mean. You said stories weren't true. But they made her go. And now she's gone." She buried her face in his chest. The manager tried to explain. "Mr. Cole, it was a business decision. We meant no disrespect." But Luke barely heard him. His daughter's words rang louder than anything else. That night, Karen stood outside her apartment building, folding the last of her mother's sweaters into a worn box. She hadn't told her mom she was fired. Not yet. She was about to close the trunk of her car when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Karen." She turned. Luke stood under the flickering street lamp, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding Joyce's crayon drawing. She straightened, defensive. "If you're here to make sure the headlines stay clean, don't worry, I'm out of the picture." He stepped closer. "I'm here because my daughter sobbed in a diner today. Because she thinks I let her lose someone important." Karen's shoulders dropped. She shouldn't have had to see that. She shouldn't have had to feel that, he said softly. "She's 5, Karen. But she knows enough to tell me, you made her go away." Silence settled between them. Luke held up the drawing. It was Joyce's crude rendition of the three of them. Karen with her ponytail, Luke with a tiny coffee cup, and Joyce in her pink dress. All three were holding hands. "She made this for you," he said. Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to cause problems." "I don't care about problems," he said. "I care that you brought my daughter back to life. You gave her joy. You gave her laughter." He stepped even closer. "I came to return something she lost." Karen met his eyes. "What?" He held the drawing out gently. "Her laughter." That night, after Karen hesitantly let Luke into her small apartment, silence hung between them, thick with all the words they had yet to say. She was barefoot, a duffel bag at her feet, boxes half packed. Luke looked around, eyes pausing on a photo of an older woman on the fridge. "I did not mean to disrupt your life," he said finally. Karen crossed her arms, uncertain. "Well, you did." Luke nodded, accepting it. Then quietly, "I came to return something Joyce lost. Her laughter. And maybe something I lost too." Karen blinked. "You're not used to asking for help, are you?" "She needs someone kind. Not perfect," he said. "Would you consider being her part-time tutor? For reading, maybe just being there." Karen hesitated. "I'm not qualified. I never even finished nursing school." "She doesn't need a teacher. She needs someone who looks at her the way you do." The words caught her off guard. Slowly, she nodded. "All right, but no promises. I'll be great at it." "You've already been more than that." In the weeks that followed, the world shrank into something quieter, gentler, just small mornings and soft evenings. Karen came by the townhouse 3 times a week. She brought a backpack with coloring books, flashcards, and sometimes cookies from the corner bakery she liked. Joyce would run to the door the second she arrived, shouting, "Miss Karen's here!" like Christmas morning had come again. One afternoon, Joyce tugged Karen into the kitchen, flour streaking her cheeks. "We're making banana muffins," she declared, proudly wielding a wooden spoon. Karen laughed and rolled up her sleeves. "Only if you promise not to eat all the chocolate chips before they go in." From the doorway, Luke watched as Karen crouched beside his daughter, gently showing her how to crack an egg. There was flour on Karen's jeans, her ponytail loosening with the heat. She looked so natural there, her laughter bouncing off the marble countertops like it had always belonged. He turned away before they saw him. Later that night, after Joyce had fallen asleep, Karen sat on the back porch, sipping chamomile tea. Luke joined her without a word, handing her a blanket. They watched the stars in silence. "She talks about you all the time," Luke finally said, "even when you're not here." Karen glanced at him. "She's a sweet kid. She hasn't laughed like this since her mom." The air shifted slightly, a weight shared but unspoken. "She still asks about her?" Karen asked softly. Luke nodded. "Every night. I don't always have the right answers." "You don't need to," Karen said. "Just showing up, that's what she remembers." He looked at her then, really looked. "You've changed our house, Karen. I don't know when it happened. It just doesn't feel hollow anymore." She didn't respond, but her smile said everything. One rainy afternoon, Joyce begged to go outside. Karen hesitated. "It's pouring." "But it's the fun kind," Joyce insisted, pulling at her hand. They ran into the garden barefoot, Joyce spinning, arms wide in her pink dress now clinging to her knees. Karen followed, laughing. They made paper boats from napkins and floated them in puddles. Mud clung to their ankles, and rain soaked Karen's ponytail, but neither cared. Luke stood at the window, phone in hand for a meeting that suddenly didn't matter. Through the glass, he saw Karen lift Joyce and twirl her gently, both laughing like they had the world to themselves. His chest tightened, and for the first time in years, Luke smiled, not for the press, not for appearances, but because something inside him softened. Something long frozen had cracked open. He didn't step outside, not yet. But he knew this was the first time he'd truly seen what home could feel like. The photo hit the tabloids early on a Monday morning. Karen did not even know it existed until a co-worker at the diner shoved a newspaper under her nose. Her heart dropped when she saw it. There she was, holding Joyce's hand, smiling, while Luke walked a step behind them. The headline screamed in bold, "Cinderella or Strategist? CEO Luke Cole seen with local waitress." She stared at the image. It looked so innocent, so ordinary. But beneath it, the article suggested something else. That Karen had positioned herself to gain favor. That the billionaire CEO had fallen for the girl from the wrong side of the counter. By noon, the internet exploded. Blogs reposted the image. Comment sections boiled with speculation. Some praised the unexpected romance, while others tore her apart. "Gold digger," one wrote. She saw a lonely man with a fat wallet. At the firm's headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Caffeine-fueled analysts whispered behind glass doors. Stocks had dipped by 4% since morning. It was not catastrophic, but it was visible, and that made it real to the board of directors. Luke stood in the center of the boardroom, arms folded, as a slideshow showed headlines from various outlets. One board member, a man named Wexler, clicked his pen furiously. "You have to make a statement," Wexler said. "Preferably one that puts some distance between the company and this waitress." "She has a name," Luke said evenly. Wexler didn't blink. "So does our brand, and right now, hers is dragging ours." Someone else chimed in. "If you care about this company, Mr. Cole, you'll do what is necessary." Luke remained quiet. Then he rose and walked out. At home, Karen sat on the couch, the news muted on the television. Joyce, sensing the tension, clung to her stuffed rabbit. Karen's phone buzzed nonstop. She had already received 4 requests for interviews, and 1 offer to appear on a talk show. She had turned them all down. "I should go," Karen told Luke when he returned. "This isn't good for Joyce, or for you." "You did nothing wrong," he said. "That doesn't matter to them." He looked at her then, really looked. Her hair was pulled back in its usual low ponytail, her eyes tired but clear. She was not someone who craved attention. She was someone trying to survive it. That night, Luke called for a press conference. The media gathered in the marble lobby of Cole and Crane Investments, reporters cramming against velvet ropes, camera lights flaring. Luke stood at the podium, a microphone positioned in front of him. The room quieted when he began to speak. "I am not here to deny anything," he said calmly. "The photo you saw was real. The woman in it is Karen Parker. She's kind, funny, and stronger than any of you know." He paused. "But you do not care about her name or her story. You care about the narrative. So let me give you one." Cameras clicked. "When my wife passed, I shut down. I showed up at board meetings. I signed documents. I made money, but I was not living. My daughter grew quieter. I lost her laughter." His voice softened. "Then one morning, at a diner I never noticed, I met someone who treated my daughter like a human being, not a headline. She did not flinch at grief or fame. She poured coffee, wiped syrup off a 5-year-old's chin, and asked nothing in return. Reporters leaned in. "You say she is beneath me. But the truth is," he looked straight at the camera, "she raised my daughter's heart when I couldn't." A hush swept the room. "She taught my child to laugh again. And me, she reminded me that not all wealth is in numbers." He stepped back from the podium. "I will not be issuing a retraction. And I will not be choosing between my company and my humanity. If that is a problem." He turned to the board members seated behind him. "They know where to send the paperwork." The moment was electric. Across America, the clip went viral. Viewers watched the replay with teary eyes. It was not just a man defending a woman, it was a father reclaiming his role, and a businessman refusing to pretend love was a liability. Back at home, Karen sat frozen on the edge of her bed, watching the screen. Joyce ran into the room and wrapped her arms around her. "You heard, Daddy?" the little girl asked. Karen nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "He chose right," Joyce said, matter of fact. Karen hugged her close. For the first time in weeks, the silence around them felt like peace, not shame. The Cole estate was unrecognizable. Balloons in soft pastels floated above the trimmed hedges, and the garden sparkled with fairy lights strung through the trees. Waiters in white shirts carried trays of lemonade and mini cupcakes. A small stage was set for a children's magician, and a hired photographer flitted around, snapping pictures of laughing kids and perfectly arranged gift tables. It was Joyce's 6th birthday. She wore her favorite pink dress, the one with a satin bow on the back and tiny embroidered stars along the hem. Her hair was tied with a ribbon that matched her father's tie. Luke had spared no expense. From the bounce house to the custom cake shaped like a storybook castle, it was a celebration fit for royalty. But amid the luxury, Joyce's eyes kept searching. "She's not here yet?" she whispered to her father. Luke glanced at his watch, then at the entrance. "She'll come." Joyce nodded solemnly. "I hope she brings hugs. I like her hugs best." Guests began to arrive. Children from Joyce's school came with their polished parents. They brought massive presents, boxes wrapped in shiny paper, topped with bows the size of basketballs. Laughter echoed as games began and cameras clicked. Still, Joyce's smile seemed incomplete. Then, just past the 2nd hour, Karen appeared. She wore a simple blue dress, her blonde hair pulled back in its usual low ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just a soft, uncertain smile and a plain paper box in her hands. She paused near the gate, clearly overwhelmed. Luke spotted her first and moved through the crowd. "You came," he said gently. "I said I would," Karen replied. "She invited me. She'll be glad." Karen stepped onto the lawn. Joyce saw her and ran, full force, into her arms. "You came," Joyce squealed, squeezing her tightly. Karen knelt down, returning the hug. "Happy birthday, sunshine." Joyce pulled back, eyes twinkling. "Did you bring a present?" Karen smiled and handed her the small box. It was wrapped in brown paper, no ribbons, no glitter. Joyce opened it and blinked. "It's empty?" Karen shook her head and pointed to the note inside. Joyce unfolded the slip of paper and read aloud. "It's empty, because the best things you fill yourself." She stared at the box for a moment, then threw her arms around Karen, burying her face into her shoulder. "I love it," Joyce whispered. "It's my favorite one." Luke stood a few feet away, watching them. His jaw tightened, not from discomfort, but from something deeper. Emotion held too long behind silence. Karen looked up, and their eyes met. He stepped forward and rested his hand on her shoulder. "You've given us back something I thought we'd lost," he said quietly. "Home." Karen's lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. Then she smiled, not politely, but fully. The kind of smile that made you believe in healing. Around them, the party went on. But for one brief moment, the noise blurred, and all that remained was a child's happiness, a father's gratitude, and a woman who had walked in without fanfare and somehow lit up the entire celebration. Later, when the cake had been cut and the guests began to leave, Joyce clutched the little empty box like it was made of gold. "It's not really empty," she told one of her friends. "It has kindness in it, and hugs, and things you can't wrap." Karen overheard and chuckled softly. Luke stood beside her, sipping coffee. "She gets that from you," he said. Karen turned to him. "I think she always had it. She just needed space to show it." Luke nodded. In that moment, with laughter echoing across the lawn and a pink dress twirling in the distance, they both understood. The most precious gifts are not the ones you buy, but the ones you become to someone else. The bell above the cafe door chimed gently, sending a soft ring through the morning quiet. Sunlight streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, catching dust motes in its glow. The tables were small but polished, the walls painted a warm cream, and the menu, handwritten in chalk, offered just the basics: pancakes, eggs, toast, coffee, comfort food. The kind of place where regulars mattered more than foot traffic. The name outside read, "The Morning Bench." It was the same building where Karen had once spilled coffee, where whispers and judgment had nearly broken her spirit, but now it was hers. Karen stood behind the counter in a pale yellow apron, her blonde hair still tied low behind her neck. She moved with quiet confidence, wiping down the counter, straightening the napkin holder, checking the pot of fresh coffee. Every so often she glanced at the small table near the window, the same table where everything had begun. Behind her, Joyce skipped between the booths, placing tiny flower jars in the center of each table. Her pink dress swayed with every step, and her ribbon had started to slide to one side, but she was too excited to care. "Do the flowers look nice here, Miss Manager?" she asked with a grin. Karen chuckled. "They're perfect. Just like our assistant in pink." Joyce beamed. "I'm also in charge of smiles." "That you are." The cafe was not full yet, but it didn't need to be. Karen had built it slowly, with help from a few friends, a small business loan, and most importantly, belief. Not in success, necessarily, but in purpose. This was a place for second chances, for good mornings that actually felt good. The bell rang again. Karen looked up, and her heart fluttered. Luke stood in the doorway. He wore a simple navy coat and no tie, a coffee in one hand and a book in the other. His presence was quieter these days, softer. He had started to let the world in again, not all at once, but just enough to feel it. Joyce spotted him first. "Daddy," she squealed, "our seat's still here." She ran to him and took his hand, tugging him toward the table by the window. Karen smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Luke let Joyce lead him, his eyes meeting Karen's over the top of her daughter's head. When he reached the table, he looked down, then up again at the two people who had unknowingly rewritten his story. "It always will be," he said quietly. Karen joined them, sliding into the seat across from his. "Your usual?" He nodded. "And one of those blueberry muffins, the ones that somehow make mornings not terrible." Joyce giggled. "She puts magic in them." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Karen shrugged. "Trade secret." They sat together, the three of them, in a cafe that had once been just a stop on a hard day. Now it was something else entirely. A beginning that had once looked like an accident. A moment that had once seemed like a mess. Joyce reached into her little backpack and pulled out a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a building with a sign. Luke tilted his head. "Is that this place?" "It's our place," Joyce said proudly. "I'm the smile. Mommy is the sunshine. And you're the chair." He blinked. "The chair? Because you stayed." Karen laughed, and so did Luke. Not the polite chuckle of a CEO, but a full, heart-deep laugh, the kind that makes people turn around and smile without knowing why. Outside, The street bustled with people going to work, coffee in hand, phones ringing. But inside, the world felt still. As the camera slowly pulled away past the window, past the sign, and into the light of the morning, the final image remained. A little girl in pink, a woman with sunlight in her hair, a man who found his way back, and a seat that was never truly empty. If this story touched your heart, the way a little girl's question changed 3 lives forever, imagine how many more are waiting to be heard. At Kindness and Love Tales, we share true-to-life romantic stories, filled with emotional twists, healing moments, and the quiet magic of connection. Subscribe now and never miss a tale that warms your soul and restores your faith in humanity. Because sometimes, it just takes one seat, one smile, or one person to remind us love always finds a way. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more.